In this video, I take you to Hougoumont Farm, the scene of some of the most ferocious fighting and the origins of one of the most intriguing stories from the battle. The brave, axe-wielding French berserker who broke down the gate to gain entry to the fortified strongpoint, who with 40 French soldiers was slaughtered after gallant hand-to-hand combat. Only a little drummer boy was spared and left to survive. So stick around to hear the gruesome end to this intriguing story. On the 18th of June 1815, a coalition army led by the British and commanded by Lord Wellington sought to defeat Napoleon, who had returned from exile to claim his European empire. While we won't necessarily cover the battle in detail during this video, we will explore this strong point, forward of the Allied defensive line and isolated on the right flank. This is Hougoumont Farm. It was here that Napoleon would launch his attack, an attempt to draw Allied resources from the ridgeline defended by Wellington and weaken his position in preparation for an attack elsewhere. Once the defensive line was weakened, he would blast the infantry off the battlefield with his artillery before sending massed infantry to drive them from the field. Relatively simple, but it didn't quite work out that way. So let's head to the farm and walk the ground, my favourite part. So I'm currently on the ridgeline where Wellington had positioned his troops. As we walk from the ridgeline towards Hougoumont, it becomes evident just how far forward of the main defended area this strongpoint was. And although it was isolated, it was some 500 metres away, it acted like an anchor for Wellington's right flank, given its strong position. And as we approach the low ground from the ridge, we notice that the farm is actually concealed from the French ground battery. It's in a little bit of dead ground, and this means that it couldn't just be bombarded into submission by French artillery. It would have to be attacked by infantry, and it would be bloody, hand-to-hand fighting. So let's look at the farm in detail. Now, we don't have any photographs of the farmstead from 1815, but we do have sketches and paintings, and we know the farm looked quite different than it does today. During the battle, many of the buildings inside the farmstead were burned to the ground, including a large chateau and a number of barns. So here we have an overview of the Hougoumont complex and the buildings as they look today. To make it easier to see, I've highlighted the walls here. The first thing you might notice is this large walled garden. For the Afghanistan veterans watching this video, it might remind you of a fob, with the sangers in the corner and the firing steps enabling the defenders to fire over the top. But in 1815, this was actually an ornamental garden. It was landscaped with paths, flower beds and shrubs, etc. I've then added a plan of the original buildings, and suddenly the complex becomes quite congested. You can see it's actually split into two courtyards, one in the north and one in the south. There was an archway connecting the two courtyards, which no longer exists. There was a large barn right here which burnt down, as well as the focal point of the farm, which was the large chateau. And this also burnt down, and only the chapel remains today. So then we come to the gates. The first is the north gate. Now this was actually left open for much of the day as it faced the Allies up to the north on the ridge. The next gate is to the south. Now this faced the French, and it was definitely not intended to be open. And in fact, this gate bore the brunt of the French attack. There are then two internal gates, one here to the east of the position, and this led to the walled garden. And there's a small passageway type gate which led into a barn. It's not represented on this plan, but it's actually positioned right here. So let's look at the surrounding ground. Here you can see this rudimentary wall that I've drawn, helping it to really pop. I've put it into a blue color. And directly opposite, there was a large wood which has since been cleared. There was a 30 or 40 yard span of ground here, and this was called the killing zone. This is where the French would emerge from the woods to face an onslaught of musket fire from the walled garden. And here you can see the killing zone from the French perspective. So let's go and see it on the ground. Now this footage perfectly shows the killing zone from the French perspective. I'm stood right at the edge of the wood where the French would have broken through that last grouping of trees into the open. And it was here that they were shot at close range by the defenders who were behind the wall and firing from loopholes. And this wall is just around the corner from the southern gate. And as I said, this bore the brunt of the French attacks. Although, of course, the French were trying to encircle the farm. They cleared the orchard to the east. And in the process, they were driving back the light roll infantry and the skirmishers, which were forward of this position. Now, as you can see from this footage, the gap was probably 30 yards or so, no more than that really. So it's not very wide. In the corner here, you can gain access to a raised platform, a bit like a compound sanger for those of you, like I said, who are Afghanistan veterans. And from here, you can get a view of the defender's perspective. Now, just across that track would have been the edge of the woodline. So just imagine how many French soldiers would have laid dead in this area. So let's take a look at the South Gate. Here there is a plaque in memory of the officers and men of the 2nd Battalion, the Coldstream Guards, who while defending Hougoumont Farm successfully held this South Gate from successive attacks throughout the 18th of June 1815. You can see the cobbled surfaces and the barns and the outbuildings which still exist, including the well, which allegedly was found to contain the bodies of a number of French dead in the days after the battle. Now, this fact is contested. Lots of people say it's a bit of a myth from Hougoumont. But just imagine, after the battle, all those dead bodies lying around, and they just got chucked inside the well. Let me know in the comments below what you think. So let's go and look at the North Gate, where our story takes place. Now, this relatively unassuming wooden gate, now ironically made of English oak, was left open at times during the battle for the purpose of resupply. I've already told you that. It may well be that the French gained access through the gate as it was open, although the official story says that a giant of a man with an axe forced the gate open by smashing it down. The story goes that Sous-Lieutenant Legros circled around the farm with a detachment of 40 or so men and gained entry to the courtyard by smashing down the gate with an axe. As he gained access, the light company flooded in behind him, 30 to 40 men in total, and they began going about their business, fighting the Allied soldiers inside in hand-to-hand combat. Now, it's said that Colonel MacDonald, aided by Sergeant James Graham, closed and held the gates by sheer physical strength against overwhelming odds as the French tried to force entry. The Frenchmen, trapped inside the courtyard, were now cut off from any reinforcement, and they were cut down and they died right here on these cobbles. It's said that all of the soldiers were killed, less for one drummer boy.
Don't kill the bastards! Finish them off!
News of the victory at Waterloo had to make it back to England. Major Henry Percy, the aide to the Duke of Wellington, was tasked with getting the news to London via official dispatch. That meant he was on horseback. It took him 3 days to get word of the victory to Parliament, and when he got there, he proclaimed victory, victory, and in his hands he had 2 captured French eagles draped in the French tricolour, and it was stained with blood. Now, if the same were to happen today, the same news would be reported hundreds of times in print, on social media, and a number of other sources, all with a different spin on things depending on which side of the political spectrum you most aligned your feed. No room for divergent thinking or critical thought here, and no easy way to compare how different outlets frame the same event. Wouldn't it be brilliant if there was a platform to collect all these views in the form of news items, determine their biases, and rate them for accuracy? Well, there is such a platform, and I'm very pleased to say that Ground News is the sponsor of today's video, and I want to show you how it works. Each day, Ground News collates over 60,000 news items from around the world and organizes them into one place. They will show you related news stories, determining political biases, showing you where the articles came from, and how many news sources are covering the same story. You can even compare headlines across the spectrum to see who's spinning the story and how. Another cool feature I use is the blind spot, which will highlight stories which have been almost exclusively covered by either the left or the right. Ground News gives me all the context I need to make sense of the headlines. With this level of transparency, it's easier to stay truly informed without falling into an echo chamber. Now, best of all, because you follow the History Explorer channel, Ground News are offering 40% off the Vantage plan for unlimited access to both the website and the app. Simply go to ground.news/History Explorer or access the link in the description below. This discount is only available for a limited time, and with 40% off, it works out as $5 a month. So go to the link now and join over 2 million people who are keeping track of the news cycle without being affected by narratives. But who was the officer with the axe? Well, Captain Mordit, a sergeant in the 1st Grenadiers à Pied, credits Sous-Lieutenant Legros and claims that he was an engineer. Legros had been an engineer sergeant and had retired in 1814, but he returned to duty when Napoleon came back from Elba. The astute amongst you will know that Legros may simply be a nickname, the Big Legros. But the next source we will look at is Adolphe Thiers in 1841, who makes reference to a commander of the engineers, a chap called Vieux, a giant of a man and a hero of Waterloo. He is said to have pushed with his shoulder to open the gate of Hougoumont, which was tenaciously defended by the British. Augustin Petiet, in his memoirs of the battle, wrote that it was Sous-Lieutenant Bonnet, an old soldier of the army of Spain, who won his commission for being the first man into the breach at the siege of Tarragona. Bonnet was given the mission by his regimental commander, Colonel Cubier, of the 1st Leger, and was killed in action at Hougoumont. So far, there are a number of names that have been presented. So what about his commander, Colonel Cubier of the 1st Leger? What does he have to say? Well, luckily, we have his memoir too, and he refers to a Sous-Lieutenant Boucher, who took a detachment around the farm building and broke down the carriage gate at the entrance to the courtyard. The 1st Light Infantry marched on his footsteps, following him in, and as he threw down the carriage gate, he and his men were fired upon at point-blank range from a raised gallery. All of them, he says, were killed. So could the true identity of the axe-wielding French officer be Sous-Lieutenant Boucher, later bastardized into Sous-Lieutenant Bonnet by Auguste Petiet? Perhaps Legros was just a nickname for this alleged mountain of a man. Please let me know in the comments what you think. Some of the people who watch my videos are genuine experts, and they always seem to have more information than I have at the time of making these videos. I would love to know what you think. So what happened to the dead at Hougoumont? Well, from this image drawn after the battle, we can see piles of French soldiers stripped of their uniforms and stacked on a pyre. It's assessed that upwards of 4,000 Frenchmen, perhaps even as many as 7,000, were killed and wounded on the ground in and around this farm. A substantial cost for what was believed to have been merely a diversionary attack to compel Wellington into weakening his position on the ridge by reinforcing the farm. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. It's a change from my usual World War II content, but I loved filming this and I really enjoyed making the video too. If you enjoyed watching this video, please hit the like button because it then tells YouTube that this is a popular video and it shares it with more people. So it genuinely does help the video. And please also leave me a comment. I read every single one of them. Until next time.